What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, April 15th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I am back from the Masters, so back to doing MLB DFS content. Going to walk through tonight's MLB DFS slate, 11 gamer on DraftKings, 50K to first in the $18 tournament. Going to take a look at what my player exposures would look like if the slate started right now and use the projections that we have available at runthesims.com. Going to go through those as you see on the screen, talk through the slate game by game as I normally do. As a reminder, obviously this stuff changes between now and lock, and everybody has different processes anyway, so it should be a lot less important for you who specifically I'm playing right now compared to how things look, how players project, all of that stuff. There's a lot of different ways that you can make very good lineups in MLB DFS. So my personal player exposure is more of just a talking point, a guide, as I always remind you. But going to go through game by game as usual and take a look at what looks good on the slate. We don't really have any weather issues to speak of. Nothing that looks particularly problematic right now. A little bit of rain possible in some games, but nothing crazy. Certainly nothing, at least right now, that is going to impact how I would play the slate. If you have questions, as always, feel free to throw those in chat as well. Happy to talk DFS strategy, slate-specific stuff, whatever it is. If I have anything to say, I will gladly answer those questions. So throw those in chat. First game we have is the Guardians taking on the Orioles in Baltimore tonight. Orioles with a 4.9 implied run total. Cleveland coming in with a 4.4 implied run total. Charlie Morton is going for the Orioles. For the Guardians, we have Logan Allen on the mound. Allen getting basically no ownership here. Charlie Morton getting 16%. Morton is only $6,500. Allen coming in at $6,300. Morton certainly has not had a particularly good start to the season so far, but he is cheap. Like I said, at $6,500, he is somebody that obviously does have a track record of being a solid enough major league pitcher. Going back to the start of last season, 24% strikeout percentage, 3.99 xFIP. Those numbers are both fine. 9.5% walk percentage is a little bit higher than you would like. 1.31 home runs allowed per 9 innings. Again, higher than you would like, but he is only $6,500. You can see here that we have him projected for 14 DraftKings points, which is actually a little bit lower than I have seen elsewhere in the industry. But that being said, he's still showing up in like 20% of my lineups. So I think that speaks to two different things. One is that there's not great pitching on this slate. There are obviously 22 pitchers. There are some solid arms going, but it's not a slate where a ton of aces stand out. If you look at the Fangraphs leaderboard of today's probable starters, not even just talking about this slate, but just all the games today, Jack Flaherty at the top with a 30% strikeout percentage, Kikuchi coming in second at 27.4%. So, you do have some solid arms, like I said, but this isn't one of those slates where you just have ace after ace at the top. And so usually on those slates, it is going to be a little bit more valuable to save some money at pitcher, roll the dice on some SP2s, and get really good bats into your lineup because the opportunity cost at pitcher isn't quite as high as when you have those slates where there's a ton of aces on them. So I think that's why I'm getting right around the field on Morton, even though we actually have a little bit lower projection on him than the industry in general. Our projection being a little bit lower is most likely driven by the fact that his stuff has not graded out particularly well so far this season. And that is also something that I think is particularly concerning with somebody like Morton. He has clearly shown the ability to be a successful major league pitcher at an age where most people cannot, but at some point that is going to stop and he is just not going to be able to get it done anymore. I'm not saying that's the case, through a few starts of this season. Most likely the truth is somewhere closer to what we saw last year. And, he does, regress closer to what he's done last year and over the last couple of years. But at some point, Charlie Morton is just going to not be a major league pitcher anymore. So it is a little bit more concerning when you see somebody like that. You see their stuff take a bit of a hit at the beginning of a season than it would be if he was, 28 years old and you had a track record of him being very good. And then the stuff takes a little bit of a hit. It would just kind of be like, okay, well, that's weird, but not very alarming. It's a little bit more alarming when you're 41 years old or whatever he is. But again, all of that being said, still getting some Charlie Morton here just because he is so cheap. who's watching what said, how many pitchers do you have in your pool on a normal day with a slate of this size? There's no specific answer. Like, I couldn't even tell you the answer. I don't manually take players out of my player pool. I leave, I let projections and sims and all of that do all of the work for me. So I'm putting in inputs for every player available, and then some are getting cut out. For example, I don't have any Logan Allen in the 150 lineups that I built for the show, but there's no specific answer. It's going to be slate dependent, not just in terms of how many games there are, but also who the pitchers are. If you had a slate where you have the same 11 games, but 18 of the pitchers project for, like, I don't know, 14, 15 points or less, and then you have 4 just absolute aces that project like 22 to 26 points, my pitcher pool is going to be a lot smaller on a slate like that, because such a high percentage of my lineups are going to have 2 of those 4 top end pitchers. Whereas if you have a slate where you have 22 pitchers and they all project within 2 points of each other, I'm going to have a ton of different pitchers because they're all essentially the same, and there would be no reason for me to take a big stand on any of them. He said, so you put your own projections in and let the sims cut who they think based on your projections. Yeah, pretty much. Like, sims don't think, they're just running through a process using the data that you give it. So if you think about what you're trying to do, if you were to like cut down your player pool, you're just mentally, manually saying, I don't think these pitchers are good enough to make it into my lineups. I'm doing the same thing, but all I'm doing is is using data to make that decision. So if the pitcher's projection and range of outcomes isn't strong enough to make it into my lineups, it's just not going to. But I don't have like an actual number I cut down to. It's going to depend on a ton of different factors. So like I said, not getting to Logan Allen, getting to about 20% Charlie Morton. Moving over to the offenses, does look like a pretty decent game to get to. Neither of these pitchers are elite by any stretch. I mentioned already with Morton that he does give up power. He does walk guys, put guys on base. Logan Allen, going back to the start of last season, only a 17.6% K percentage, 1.93 home runs allowed per 9 innings. And keep in mind, Camden Yards always has been good for left-handed power, but it is going to be better for right-handed power this year than it has been for any of the last few. They moved the wall in left field, of course, back in, I think, 2022. Could be completely wrong on the year, but I think it was 2022. Made it very, very difficult to hit home runs to left field. They sort of course corrected this year. They moved it back in, not all the way to where it was prior, but definitely a lot closer. It's also lower than it was last season and for the last couple of seasons. So a reminder that right-handed power is going to play better in Camden Yards than it has in the last few seasons. If you look at the splits for these pitchers, going back to the start of last year, 180 expected ISO with only a 20.5% strikeout percentage against same-handed hitters for Charlie Morton. That is not completely surprising for him to struggle a little bit more with same-handed hitters when you consider that he is so reliant on his curveball. That is a pitch that does tend to play better against opposite-handed hitters. So 27% K percentage to lefties, 154 expected ISO to them, 180 expected ISO with only the 20.5% K percentage to righties for Morton. That is certainly not to say that you shouldn't be looking to left-handed power bats in the Cleveland lineup. Jose Ramirez is obviously great. Steven Kwan is solid. Kyle Manzardo is fine. Nolan Jones is fine. But this is something that, it is a point in favor of Morton. The Guardians are running 8 left-handed hitters out here. So that's not to say that he's a lock to have a good game or anything like that. And it is factored into his projection that I already mentioned. But I just mentioned the splits, 27% K percentage against lefties since last year, only 20% to righties. The Guardians apparently said, screw that, we don't care, and are just running 8 lefties out there. So if you had to, not necessarily in terms of strikeout rates, because this is a team that is difficult to strike out, especially at the top with Steven Kwan, and you have Ramirez up there. But from a split standpoint purely, this is as good as it gets for Charlie Morton. Again, not talking specifically about the hitters because they themselves individually are difficult to strike out, especially at the top. But that is, a point kind of in favor of Morton. The only right-handed bat in this Cleveland lineup is Gabriel Arias, hitting 6th at second base. So You do have left-handed power bats, playing better in Camden Yards, but they do generally hit Morton not as well. For Logan Allen, going back to last season, right-handed hitters 226 expected ISO, lefties only 155, only a 17% strikeout percentage against righties as well. So this is where it does really come into play, that reminder that you are going to get more right-handed home runs in Camden Yards this year than in previous seasons. The Orioles lineup is nothing but right-handed hitters, with the exception of Gunnar Henderson batting cleanup. Obviously, he's better against righties than lefties, but he's just really good overall. Gives you stolen base upside as well. And then Cedric Mullins, hitting 7th, is in the lineup. He also gives you stolen base upside. Now, one thing you do need to keep in mind with the Orioles here is that because they are running this right-handed heavy lineup out here, there is some pinch hit risk, but it's actually not as bad as you may expect it to be. If you go through this lineup, you have Westberg at the top. He's not getting pinch hit for. Rutschman's DHing. O'Neill, Henderson, lefty, obviously not getting pinch hit for. Mountcastle's probably not getting pinch hit for. You do not have Ryan O'Hearn in the starting lineup, so there is some pinch hit risk for Mountcastle. Like if it's a really specific spot where Ryan O'Hearn is on the bench and Mountcastle's up, and it's a right-handed reliever in, maybe they go to O'Hearn, but he's not somebody that you're going to be overly concerned with the pinch hit risk. And you can see here as well, this is something that if you're using our projections, which you can use using the link in the description below, Ryan Mountcastle still only like a 3% pinch hit chance here. So not likely to get pinch hit for. The guys that you do or would expect to have a high pinch hit probability are Jorge Mateo, Laureano, and Sanchez, but Sanchez is actually lower than you would expect because of Adley Rutschman being the DH here. For them to pinch hit for Gary Sanchez in this game, they have to then move Adley Rutschman, the catcher, which then means they do not have a DH. So you really cannot pinch hit for Sanchez outside of like the 8th or 9th inning in a really key spot. This is not a spot where if Gary Sanchez comes up in the 5th or 6th inning and the Guardians bring in a right-handed reliever, the Orioles can't really do anything about it because of Rutschman being the DH. So Gary Sanchez actually has a lower pinch hit probability than he would if, for example, Rutschman were the catcher and Sanchez were the DH. Sanchez would be almost a lock to get pinch hit for once you get further into the game. That is not the case here. Mateo does have a lot of pinch hit risk. You have Jackson Holliday on the bench. So very good chance Holliday's hitting for him. Laureano, trying to think because Kowser's hurt. The Orioles have Kjerstad on the bench. So Laureano, very high pinch hit risk as well. Pretty likely to get hit for by Kjerstad as you get deeper into the game. But I did want to mention Gary Sanchez. Actually, I think that number is even a little bit inflated on the pinch hit percentage because of the position that he's playing. But Laureano and Mateo for sure, pretty likely to not be finishing this game out. The exception would be if the Orioles are winning. If they're winning by a lot, then maybe they don't get pitch hit for, just because you don't care as much about matching up if the game's less competitive. But also defensively, Jorge Mateo, very good. Not that Jackson Holliday is not good, but there's less of an impetus to get Mateo out of the game. If you're up by a few runs, you can leave him in there for defense. Laureano's got a cannon in the outfield. He was a really highly regarded outfielder earlier in his career. Metrics in recent seasons haven't been as good. But Heston Kjerstad is absolute dog shit. So as a defensive player, so if they are playing from with a lead, you could see Laureano and Mateo just stay in the game. So it's not an absolute that they're getting pinch hit for it, but those are the two that I would be most cautious of. But the top of this order, I think really you should be fine. Also pretty unlikely that Mullins is getting pinch hit for. The case for him would be something like they bring in a left-handed reliever to face him, but like they're already starting him against the lefty. He's one of their best defensive options. So really, I think you're worrying about Mateo and Laureano as far as that goes. As far as getting to the Orioles, they are showing up for me. Showing up for the field as well, pretty much 5 to 10% ownership on the main pieces here. Henderson, O'Neill, Sanchez, Westberg, Mountcastle, Rutschman, all getting 5 to 10%. I am a little bit north of that, 16% Henderson, 15% on O'Neill, 12 on Sanchez, 9 on Westberg, 8 on Mountcastle, 7 on Rutschman. So I am getting to the Orioles. I do think they look pretty good here. They're my 4th highest used stack overall. All stack types, 2 through 5. They are my highest owned 5-man stack right now. So the Orioles do look pretty good to me. Again, I think that the park, this would not be nearly as appealing a spot last season as it is this season. Who's watching what said, would your answer to what I asked be different if you were only playing a 3 max 20 entry and that's all you're playing? No, I still do the same thing. Like spend a lot of time and have spent a lot of time working on a process that gives me what I want without me having to manually make decisions. Because the more things that I'm putting my finger on and saying, I don't want this guy, it's more difficult for me to have full context doing something like that than it is for to bake it into my process, because slates are so different. You never want to just look and be like, oh, well, this player is projected less than 12 points, so I'm not playing him. Some slates, 12 points is good. Some slates, it's not. Like if you're talking about pitching. So the more that I am manually making changes without just using all of the data available to me, the more likely I am to make mistakes. So even when I'm playing 20 max, even if that's all I'm playing, obviously I'm going to have a much smaller pool of players because I'm only playing 3 lineups, but it's not going to be any arbitrary me like clicking something and saying, well, this is the cutoff. There would be some 3 max slates where I have the same 2 pitchers in all 3 lineups. There's going to be some where I don't have a pitcher in more than 1 lineup because they all look the same. So as a general rule, your player pool you're probably going to want your player pool to include more players. The more that players look the same on a slate, and also obviously the bigger the slate is. But yeah, like that's pretty much what it is. Is there a site you're looking at to see the stats you use to narrow what you're looking for? I use the projections that we offer at Run the Sims. These are new this season. Like we just got them up automated about a week or so ago. Very excited to use these. We spent a lot of time basically trying to automate the stuff that is in Utical's head, put that on paper, make it so that it's usable for other people. So that's been, a whole process behind the scenes, ongoing, looking to obviously always improve these. But those are the projections I use. And then I use the SaberSim tool to run through my simulation process. Prior to that, if you're not using Sims, I use Fantasy Cruncher before I started using SaberSim. So, but yeah, I use the Run the Sims projections, the ones on the screen, the ones that you can get in the description below. On the Cleveland side, going up against Morton, again, pretty solid spot, except for I do hate that they're just running all these lefties out there. Jose Ramirez is very, very good. Goes without saying. Getting 10% ownership. I'm right around the field on him. I think he looks good. He's my highest owned Cleveland bat. Angel Martinez, 2% ownership. I'm at 6%, $3,100 outfielder. Whatever, he's cheap. Switch hitter. Getting to like 2 to 6% of the rest of Cleveland. So that's pretty much just stacks. They're not getting any ownership either outside of Ramirez. So not taking any real stands there. Ramirez getting 10%, everybody else getting less than 5%. So the Orioles do look like the team that is a bit more appealing here. Like I said, they are the lineup that does have both lineups have the platoon advantage against the opposing pitcher, but Logan Allen does actually struggle against right-handed hitters, while Charlie Morton does not. Cleveland said, screw it, we don't care. Baltimore said, okay, we're going to put a bunch of righties in the lineup. So I do think the Orioles look better here. Kansas City going into Yankee Stadium to take on the Yankees. Kind of an interesting park shift for the Royals because Kauffman Stadium is a very good park for offense, but Yankee Stadium is a better park for home runs, which obviously really drives upside in DFS. So it's a nice park shift for DFS tournament winning upside. The matchup, though, is very difficult for Kansas City going up against Max Fried. They have a 3.9 implied run total. Yankees have a 5.3 implied run total going up against Michael Wacha. Flip over to this game. I keep forgetting I need to do that on this screen. Fried projects very well. One of the highest projected pitchers on the slate at 18.2 DraftKings points. Michael Wacha, decent point per dollar guy at 13, but doesn't really look necessary on this slate. He's not getting any ownership. I'm not really getting to him. I am a little bit over the field on Fried. $9,500 price tag, I think is fine. It's easy enough to still build good lineups around him when you have 22 offenses to choose from. So he's getting 21% ownership. I'm at 32%. Going back to the start of last season, not an elite strikeout pitcher, but a very good pitcher overall. 23.6% strikeout percentage, 3.28 xFIP, only 0.66 home runs per 9. On a lot of slates, I don't really love getting to somebody like Fried at 9,500, just because on a lot of slates you have more pitchers with a ton of strikeout upside. But on a slate like this, where you don't have the same sort of opportunity cost in terms of strikeout ability, getting to somebody like Fried, who is just really good, is more appealing here. Also worth noting that Kansas City plays their home games in the second most difficult park for getting strikeouts. I've talked about this a lot before, but Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City has a very good batter's eye in center field. It allows hitters to see the ball very well out of the pitcher's hand. And as a result, it is more difficult to get strikeouts there than any park other than Coors Field. So Kansas City moving into Yankee Stadium, you do actually expect them to strike out at a bit higher rate than their average, and certainly than they do at home. Power said, do I prefer Fried or Flaherty on FanDuel? I have no idea. I haven't built FanDuel lineups. From a projection standpoint, we have Fried at 33.9 going 6 innings. We have Flaherty. I'm pretty sure the answer here is going to be, I don't give a shit. We have Flaherty at 33.55. If you wanted to use like the tiebreaker, you have more outs going to Fried. Obviously, that's baked into the fantasy point projection, but the quality start does matter on FanDuel. Again, it's baked in. You can see it right here. 0.6 points for the quality start for Fried, 0.39 for Flaherty. But yeah, I mean, I think the answer is I don't care. Whatever fits better with your stack. Like if you're stacking the Yankees, I would certainly prefer Fried. If you're stacking the Tigers, I would certainly prefer Flaherty. Other than that, maybe if there's an ownership gap, I would just take whoever the lower owned one is. But I assume with how similarly they're projected and priced, it's going to be the same. So the answer would essentially be just click one and don't worry about it too much. Doesn't really matter. Going back to the pitching here, again, not interested in Waka. Brutal spot going into Yankee Stadium. Yankees, obviously, a very good offense. Waka, not a bad pitcher, not a great strikeout pitcher, and just doesn't really seem super necessary for this slate. But I do like Max Fried quite a bit. Offensively, not surprisingly, the Yankees are getting some ownership. Nothing too crazy. It's still an 11-game slate, but 15% ownership coming into Aaron Judge, 10% coming into Ben Rice, and then it kind of just goes down from there for the Yankees. Jazz Chisholm getting like 8%, Bellinger getting 6%, everybody else sub 5. I'm a little bit over the field on the Yankees, which I am certainly happy to be. Plenty of power upside in this lineup. That goes without saying. Michael Wacha is also a pitcher that historically has struggled a bit more with right-handed power, similar to Charlie Morton. Same reason, just different pitch. He is changeup reliant. That is another pitch that generally plays better to opposite-handed hitters. So if you see a pitcher, a right-handed pitcher that is reverse splits, that has given up more production to righties than lefties, and you see that they rely heavily on a changeup or on a curveball, those are two pitches that should make you think that those splits might be here to stay. Whereas if it's like a fastball slider guy, it's probably just noise and going to go away because those are pitches that play better to opposite or to same-handed hitters rather. Michael Wacha, just like Charlie Morton, is somebody that you would expect those to be real. 173 expected ISO to righties since the start of last year, 147 to lefties. Strikeout percentage against righties is about 2 points lower as well. So not that you need any reason to like Aaron Judge, but that does set up even a little bit better for Aaron Judge, given that he does struggle a little bit more with right-handed power. And again, those numbers against righties are not bad. It's just, a little bit worse than his numbers against lefties. Ben Rice, very favorably priced here, batting leadoff at 3,800. He does hit from the left side, but you're in Yankee Stadium, which we know plays up left-handed power a ton, and he's leading off at 3,800, so that's just going to look good. Jazz is expensive, batting fifth. That's keeping the ownership and my exposure at him down a little bit. He is also only second base eligible, but certainly if you can get to him, if you can get to Bellinger, there's still plenty of upside for left-handed power bats in Yankee Stadium. I think that goes without saying. But the two priorities for me here from the Yankees are Aaron Judge and Ben Rice. Judge for the upside, obviously, and then Rice, not to say he doesn't have upside, but also a very good point per dollar play at $3,800. So I think you can use them as two-mans. You can use them as one-offs. You can certainly use them as a full stack as well. Michael Lampert said, is Patrick Corbin Day still a thing? Yeah, Patrick Corbin still sucks, if that's what you're asking. He just sucks for a different team now than in the past. So, the Kansas City side here against Fried. Obviously, they're not going to look as good as the New York side. Bobby Witt is getting 10% ownership. I'm below the field there, which isn't too surprising given that I am above the field on Fried, but if you want to get to Bobby Witt, goes without saying, by all means, he's incredibly good, gives you power upside, gives you stolen base upside. All of that is great, just not the spot that I'm really getting to right now. You can see that we have him projected for 0.2 stolen bases, which is the highest mark in the game, just ahead of Michael Garcia. He projects as the third highest scoring player in the game behind Rice and Judge. So clearly the highest scoring KC guy. If you want to play Bobby Witt Jr., go for it. I'm not, or at least not playing him too much right now. Salvador Perez, same kind of thing. Catcher, first base. Clearly a ton of upside. He's only 4K, but does have the tough matchup against Fried. So I'm not really getting to Kansas City. You could make the case for them, as a negatively correlated stack against a popular pitcher in Yankee Stadium. Wouldn't be the craziest argument I've heard, but also with it being 11 games, as I point out pretty much every time, the negative correlation component becomes a little bit less interesting, just because it's not as simple as saying, they made Max Fried have a bad DFS game, they're probably a winning stack. A very high percentage of the time that they make Fried not be a great play, they still end up kind of not being a tournament winning stack either. So it's still pretty low probability there. Boston going into Tampa Bay to take on the Rays. Reminder that this is not them going into Tropicana Field. In previous seasons, if you were talking about this matchup, this would be, a huge park downgrade going into the Trop. They are going into a single A stadium in Tampa Bay instead of the Trop, and it is outdoors. So we have seen the wind play a role there as well. For this one, doesn't look like there's anything too noteworthy in terms of wind or weather, but certainly not the same park downgrade that it used to be. For Boston, Walker Buehler on the mound. For the Rays, it is Ryan Pepiot, and I have a lot of Ryan Pepiot, which I do not like, scares the shit out of me, don't really want it, hopefully goes away, but at the same time, if that's what I end up with, it's what I end up with. I do like the $7,400 price tag. I think that is what is driving it. The matchup here against the Red Sox is obviously scary. The offense is talented. The park is scary. But we have Pepiot projected for 17 DraftKings points at only 7,400. I do think it's a bit of a mispricing, and I think that's what is getting him into my lineups. Also, I don't think that our projection is really that high compared to the industry. So that's, something else just kind of reinforces that I do think he is underpriced here. This isn't like a spot where DraftKings thinks he's 7,400 or, should be 7,400, and every other projection site thinks that he should be 7,400 and we think he should be 8,800 or something. This is just, I think, a mispricing that kind of alleviates the ballpark and the matchup. Not alleviates in the sense of it makes it so he's automatically going to be good, obviously, but it just completely bakes in that risk and makes me just want to get back to playing Ryan Pepiot, even though it does scare me. You look at what he has done from a strikeout standpoint, 25.8% strikeout percentage is the fifth highest of any starter going today, regardless of if they're on the slate or not. 4.07 xFIP, not ideal, but it's fine. He does give up power, which is really scary in this matchup in Park. But 25.8% strikeout percentage, I think, is driving a lot here, in addition to the fact that he is only $7,400 and you don't have a ton of good pitching on this slate. So he's getting about 15% ownership. I have him at like 44% right now. Again, I would not be upset if that comes down a little bit. That is obviously taking on a lot of risk in a risky spot from a portfolio, exposure standpoint. But at the same time, I ran through my stuff and he shows up a lot and I'm fine with it. I certainly think he's underpriced from a medium projection standpoint. I definitely think he's underpriced from an upside standpoint. Walker Buehler on the other side, not getting any ownership. He's in like 3% of my lineups at 7,500. I don't really see a great reason for it. Obviously, he has not been the same pitcher in a while that he was, earlier in his career with the Dodgers. He has shown some upside this year, had the ridiculous game, I think a couple starts ago. I don't remember, like 11 strikeouts or something, if I'm remembering correctly. But 19% strikeout percentage overall since the start of last year, 1.88 home runs per nine, 4.3 xFIP. Not somebody I'm getting too much of. The lineups where I do have him, I would expect it to be where, I'm getting to more popular stacks. I'm getting to more popular SP1s, maybe. And actually, this is showing up. I'm using him a lot in Red Sox stacks, it looks like, or at least I have like 4 lineups with Buehler. 3 of them are Red Sox stacks. So, there is some positive correlation there that would make him look a little bit better if you are stacking the Red Sox, just because if the Red Sox do well, obviously Buehler is more likely to get a win. But also if you're playing the Red Sox, you're not using Pepiot at that same price point. So it creates a situation where the guy that clearly stands out at 74 in that $7,500 price range is not an option. So Buehler, looks a little bit better in that regard as well. But overall, just not somebody I'm really getting much of. Offensively, the field is not getting to too much of this game, and neither am I. I certainly don't mind getting to some Tampa Bay bats against Buehler. We've seen his struggles, but Brandon Lau getting 8% ownership is the highest owned guy in this game. He would be my second highest owned guy behind Yandy Diaz, who is the second or third highest owned guy in this game. But on the Tampa Bay side, again, no true priorities, but Yandy Diaz and Brandon Lau are the guys showing up the most for me. Since the start of last year, Buehler, 160 expected ISO allowed to lefties, 175 to righties. It's not been so much that he gives up a ton of power as much as he just doesn't get a ton of strikeouts, puts guys on base, but not necessarily in the most fantasy-friendly way. After Diaz and Lau, it's a drop-off and basically just whatever Tampa Bay guys fit into stacks. I don't think I'm using them as one-offs too much. On the Boston side against Pepio, there is home run upside. As I said, Trevor Story, Alex Bregman, Rafael Devers, all showing up most often for me, but still only 6% of my lineups. Fields getting to about 6% on Story, 7% on Duran and Devers. Any of these Red Sox bats look fine, but I don't really think that there are true priorities in this game. 142 expected ISO allowed to lefties for Pepio since last season, 174 to righties. So again, nothing that really stands out, but certainly two capable enough offenses that, in a park that can play up power, that they look fine, here and there. Moving on to the Braves taking on the Blue Jays. Revenge game, kind of, for Kevin Gausman. Going up against, not Ryan Pepio. I need to change that filter. Going up against Spencer Schwellenbach. Schwellenbach has gotten very, very expensive at $10,500. He is a good pitcher. I do not think he's a $10,500 pitcher, especially in a relatively tough strikeout matchup against Toronto. The Blue Jays active roster against right-handed pitching since the start of last season ranks somewhere. Oh, dead last in strikeout percentage, 16.7%. I didn't realize it was that low. I was looking in the 20th range. 16.7% K percentage on their active roster against right-handed pitching since the start of last year. 5% ownership coming into Schwellenbach. I'm not getting to him. He does actually have one of the best pitches in baseball so far this year on a per 100 pitch basis. I pulled that up earlier and was just checking it out on Baseball Savant. Of qualified pitches so far this season, Schwellenbach's slider actually grades out the best per 100 pitches. He's thrown it 52 times, 19% usage rate. Really, really good pitch so far. But again, not a super high usage rate for him. And the bigger issue here is not that I think he has a lack of stuff or anything like that. It is that the matchup is really tough and he's really expensive. Gausman's getting 10% ownership at 8,500. I'm getting to about 5%. We have seen his stuff play a little bit better so far this year than it did last year. His fastball has graded out very well on Baseball Savant so far, which is good to see because he definitely needs that pitch. But I'm still not getting to too much. The matchup against the Braves does give you some strikeout upside. Also, obviously, plenty of power in that lineup. I think Gausman looks like a secondary option here at 8,500. You can see that we actually have him projected a little bit higher than Schwellenbach, which surprises me a little bit. If you disagreed and want to say Schwellenbach should be higher, I'm not going to argue too much. But either way, you're talking about, $2,000 price difference there between the two of them, and also a Braves lineup that does have more strikeouts in it than the Toronto lineup does. Atlanta's active roster, sixth in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching since the start of last year at 23.9%. So again, using active roster is a little bit flawed, or not even a little bit. It is flawed. It's including every player on the roster. It's not including their starting lineup, but it's kind of just a quicker, easier way for me to pull it up. And the Braves do strike out more than the Blue Jays. Offensively here, I am getting to a lot of Michael Harris and Austin Riley in particular. The field is getting there as well. 15% projected ownership coming into Michael Harris. I'm at 27%. 12% projected ownership coming into Austin Riley. I am at 21%. So I am getting to a lot of the two of them individually against Gausman. Harris leading off 4K, stolen base upside, power upside. He's been hitting the ball hard to start the season. left-handed power plays up in Toronto as well, if I remember correctly. Actually going to double check that. I might be wrong. It might be right-handed power. But either way, the park goes into the projection here. So whether what I said is right or wrong, it doesn't matter. Let me find that maybe. Harris does give you power upside. He gives you stolen base upside. Riley obviously gives you a lot of power upside, and he is only $4,300 as well. So they both look good against Gossman. Gossman has historically been reverse splits as well. Very good splitter throughout his career. It dropped off last year, but that is why he's been reverse splits historically. Last year, he actually gave up more power to lefties, though. 193 expected ISO to lefties, 195 to lefties, or to righties. So same amount of power, rather, not more. But that was a change from earlier in his career, but it is something that we've actually seen now for a few seasons, going back to 2022 even. 156 expected ISO to righties, 182 to lefties, 197 to lefties since 2023, 167 to righties. So you actually saw those reverse splits change longer ago than I thought they did. So again, pointing to Michael Harris as a very, very good play here. Austin Riley is a very good play at that price. Matt Olson obviously looks good if you can get to him. First base does come with pretty high opportunity cost, but only a $4,500 salary for him is good as well. Left-handed park factor in Toronto is league average at 99 over the last few seasons. For right-handed bats, it is 98. So I was just completely misremembering. I thought one side had the home run advantage there, but neutral park for both, apparently. Harris, Riley, I think look very good if you can get to Olson again at first base. I like him too. It just becomes a little bit more difficult because, again, of that opportunity cost at the position where, if you're playing Olson, there's plenty of first basemen that also have very high ceilings that you are not playing. My screen is completely there it goes. Completely frozen, but getting to 10% Olson, field's projected for like 6 or 7%. So I'm a little over the field there as well. You do also get a little bit of the negative correlation effect going up against Gossman since he's getting 10% ownership. It's nothing huge, especially on an 11-game slate, but happy to get to some Braves bats against him, specifically Harris and Riley. And then I do also like Olson quite a bit as well. Beyond that, if you're getting some other Atlanta bats showing up in stacks, that's fine. They're a pretty cheap offense overall, and they are really cheap when you consider the amount of power and stolen base upside that they have in their lineup. Like the ceiling for them is pretty appealing. I screwed up my SaberSim page, so trying to get that reloaded. Sorry about that. Had to refresh the screen and then lost the lineups that I had loaded in, so getting those back in there now. But I do like the upside the Braves offer here at pretty inexpensive salaries. You look at Olson at 4,500, Harris at 4K, Riley 4,300. Like for the amount of power that those guys have, I think they look pretty good here. On the Toronto side against Schwellenbach, even though I'm not playing a lot of Schwellenbach, I don't really want to get to the Blue Jays all that much either. They certainly have some talent in their lineup, but I do think Schwellenbach is good. Since the start of last season, 108 expected ISO allowed to righties with a 29.5% K percentage, 22% K percentage to lefties. Still only, a respectable 152 expected ISO though. So not really a guy that I want to be targeting against all that much. I do prefer the Braves bats here quite a bit. Tigers taking on the Brewers in Milwaukee, whatever the hell they call that stadium now. I think it's American Family Life Values Field or some ridiculous bullshit. I think it's like an insurance company with a weird name. But we have the Tigers with a 4.5 implied run total. Jack Flaherty on the mound. We have the Brewers with a 4.1 implied run total. Quinn Priester on the mound for the Brewers. I am not getting the Quinn Priester. He is getting 7% ownership at 6,600. If you want to mix him in a little bit, fine. But he's not the one I'm getting to. I am basically 2x the field on Jack Flaherty, though, at 9K. Love the strikeout upside he brings, especially, again, in the context of this slate where there's not a lot of strikeout guys on the slate. Flaherty has the highest strikeout percentage by a wide margin, 30.1% K percentage. Next highest is Kikuchi at 27.4%. 3.02 xFIP since the start of last year is also the best of anybody pitching today or on this slate. We do know that Flaherty gives up some power, but that's really the only negative on him. 23.8% K minus BB percentage is 2.8 points better than Yusei Kikuchi, who's the next best guy on the slate, and better than Schwellenbach, who's the next best guy on the slate. I think, you really would have a hard time arguing that Spencer Schwellenbach is a better pitcher than Jack Flaherty, and Flaherty is $1,500 less expensive. The park is not great to pitch in Milwaukee, but Flaherty just really good, has really good stuff, gets a lot of strikeouts, and right now only projected for 15 to 16% ownership. So I like that as well. Very happy to be getting to him. Offensively, nothing really standing out too much. Kerry Carpenter and Riley Green are my highest two players in this game in about 9% of my lineups. Carpenter's getting the most ownership from the game at about 8%. Green is second at 6%. So two relatively inexpensive left-handed power outfield bats. Obviously, a lot of opportunity cost in the outfield. And it can be difficult to grab like one-offs in the outfield too, because usually teams' best hitters are going to be in the outfield, at least a couple of them. So whatever team you're stacking, you're probably using outfield spots on those stacks. And so if you're not stacking the Tigers, it becomes difficult to prioritize Carpenter or Green. Priester, only an 8% strikeout percentage in a limited sample since the start of last year, 10.2% since the start of 2023 against lefties, 210 expected ISO to lefties since the start of 2023, only 166 last season. So again, small sample, but it did get a bit better last year. Hopefully, for his sake, he can continue that. But I do like the idea of getting the Carpenter and Green in particular. If you do need outfield one-offs or even like a two-man Detroit stack, I like the left-handed power bats here against Quinn Priester. He doesn't miss a lot of bats. This park is a home run upgrade for the Tigers also. Left-handed bats in particular over the last 3 seasons from a home run standpoint. This is the 10th best park for left-handed home runs. Tiger Stadium, by comparison, is the 18th best park. So nice upgrade there for Carpenter and Green. So nothing, priority-wise offensively here, but I do like Carpenter and Green. Milwaukee, clearly against Flaherty, not going to look that good. One of the best pitchers, if not the best pitcher on the slate from a talent standpoint. Josh said Braves going to have 3 10K pitchers when Strider comes back and Sale starts pitching better. It's kind of nuts. Yeah, I mean, Schwellenbach might come down a bit. How many pitches for Knack tonight? Not sure. I'll see what we have as outs projected for when I get to the Dodgers game. Do I like the Mariners bats tonight? I know they aren't on the main, but I think they look pretty good. I don't know. I couldn't even tell you who they're playing. If they're not on the main, I haven't run anything for them, so can't tell you. What's up, Humboldt? Good to see you back in chat. Mets taking on the Twins in Minnesota. Pretty nondescript game here, I think. 4.4 implied run total for the Mets, 4.2 for the Twins. Bailey Ober going for the Twins. Tyler McGill going for the Mets. This is a game where I will be looking to pitching more than hitting, most likely. Ober is showing up in about 15% of the field's projected lineups and about 27% of the lineups that I built. McGill showing up about 7% for the field, 16% for me. So I'm right around 2x on both of these guys, and that is fine with me in this park and at these salaries. $6,700 for Bailey Ober is just cheaper than he should be. Fully stretched out, projected to face 23 batters here, give or take, projected for 5 2/3 innings. 15.78 fantasy point projection looks pretty good. And then the same for McGill here, basically a 16-point projection at 7,900. These are both solid pitchers. The matchups aren't perfect, especially, Ober does, I think, have the more difficult matchup against the Mets. Mets active roster, 10th in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching since the start of last season, but also a 117 WRC plus, largely, of course, driven by Juan Soto. But I think from a talent standpoint, 6,700 for Ober is just very, very cheap. And for McGill, it's 7,900 I think is perfectly fine as well. McGill has the 3rd highest strikeout percentage on the slate since the start of last season at 27%, respectable 3.72 xFIP. And then you have Ober coming in with the 4th highest strikeout percentage at 26.5%, 3.89 xFIP. These are just two good pitchers in a pretty solid park for pitching. The only thing missing, is good matchups, but at these salaries, I'm not overly concerned about the matchups, and the ownership's not really high either. So I'm over the field on both of these guys right now. Offensively, I wouldn't expect to be getting to too much, and I am not. Neither is the field. Francisco Lindor, Matt Wallner, Juan Soto, my highest owned guys offensively from this game, between 4 and 5%. For the field, it's Lindor, Soto, Nimmo. Lindor, the highest owned guy at 7%. So not a lot that stands out here. If you dig into the pitching a little bit, we can see if there's any splits that stand out. For Bailey Ober since the start of last year, 186 expected ISO to righties, 144 to lefties. So a little bit of reverse splits as far as power goes against righties. He does have a high strikeout percentage against both sides of the plate, though. That would point you if you wanted to, dig in, if you wanted to look at those, it does point you towards, Pete Alonso as the best right-handed power bat in this lineup. Maybe he takes, a shot at like Mark Vientos or something like that. But obviously, if you're looking at Mets bats, you're still going to prefer just the best overall guys first with Soto and Lindor. Soto, of course, a bit more expensive, but is kind of interesting to look at the Ober right-handed power allowed and then think about Alonso and maybe Vientos. For McGill, 134 expected ISO to lefties, 151 to righties. So again, it was a little bit more power allowed to righties last year, but nothing that stands out as crazy. Certainly not somebody that I'm like actively looking to target against for any particular reason. A's taking on the White Sox in Chicago, two abominations of major league franchises. This one is kind of strange to me. Jeffrey Springs is getting 17% ownership at 8,200. I am not getting to him right now. And so I do actually want to double check how we have him projected just to make sure that, there's not some sort of like glaring error or anything there. And yeah, I mean, 13 to 14 fantasy points, I think, is a reasonable projection. 4 to 5 strikeouts, not projected to go super deep into the game by any stretch. We don't have him getting to 5 innings. If we go back, yeah, I don't know. Maybe, yeah, like that's something that I'm going to end up asking about. Like he threw 103 pitches last time out, went 6 innings, facing the White Sox with a 3.6 implied run total. I do think our outs projection is probably a little bit low here, so that's something that I'll bring up. Maybe it'll change, maybe it won't, but I will mention that. I do think that Springs looks fine here at 8,200. Like the matchup's good. He's a pretty good pitcher overall. He is fully stretched out, 25% strikeout percentage since the start of last year, 3.88 xFIP. So I do like Springs. I like him more than our projections do. I will just flat out say that. That's something that I either will change it or I personally will be making mine a little bit higher. Matchup's good. I think the ownership's fine at 8,200. So that is also something that, going back to the Ryan Pepio thing, once I adjust Jeffrey Springs, I assume I'm going to be getting less Pepio. I'll still be getting them. I still think he's a good play at that price, but getting to more Jeffrey Springs will probably cut into him a bit as well. Sean Burke at 6,200, getting 2% ownership. I'm not getting to him. If you get there, it's just as like a punt, last guy in, SP2, save some ownership type play, but I'm not getting to him. I do prefer Springs. Offensively, I would prefer the A's bats here, and the field would as well, but not too much ownership coming in. 11 to 12% coming into Shea Langoliers. That makes a lot of sense. He's one of the highest upside catchers whenever he plays, has a ton of power, but you're getting him, in Chicago here, which is nice as well. Tons of power, $4,300 price tag. Sean Burke, unproven pitcher. No real sample on him yet. 207 pitches thrown to righties, 331 to lefties, 380 expected ISO to righties. You can't actually read into that, but kind of fun to look at and then think about Shea Langoliers. But he's, I think, pretty clearly the top option from this game, followed by Butler, Rooker, Soderstrom, Blade, getting to the A's more than the White Sox. Of the White Sox, I do think Luis Robert looks like the best option. He's in about 7% of my lineups, Field's at about 4%. So to recap this one, I think Springs is the best overall play from the game. And then it's Shea Langoliers. And then it's, the rest of the good A's bats rather, followed by Luis Robert. Houston going into St. Louis, going into Busch Stadium. For the Cardinals, we have Eric Fetty on the mound. For the Astros, Hunter Brown. 11% projected ownership coming into Brown. I'm getting to like 3%. I think he's a good pitcher. He's also just expensive here at $10,000. Strikeout stuff is good. It's not as good as you would like it to be for somebody with his stuff, but still projects reasonably well here. 16.5 DraftKings points. Again, it's just the price tag being a little bit prohibitive when you do have quality pitchers that are available for less. Jack Flaherty is getting similar ownership at $1,000 less. You just have, other arms that aren't really that different, don't project much worse, and some that project better and just aren't as expensive. Since the start of last season, 25% strikeout percentage for Brown, 3.44 xFIP. So another guy kind of like Max Fried, where the strikeout percentage isn't as good as you would like for the salary, but he is a good pitcher. He is good at getting outs, limiting runs, all of that. So that is, why I think 10% ownership is fine, but I am a little bit below the field. I'm not getting to Fetty here against the Astros. Offensively, Yordan Alvarez getting the most ownership in the game at about 9%. Jose Altuve, Jeremy Pena, Christian Walker, Isaac Paredes all getting 5 to 10% as well. For Houston, no ownership really coming in to the Cardinals. For me, I'm getting to Alvarez and Pena the most. Pena, 3,600 at shortstop, batting fifth. Just a really valuable position and price tag there for him going up against Fetty in, perfectly fine matchup. And then Yordan Alvarez, obviously self-explanatory. He is Yordan Alvarez, and you can kind of take him against anybody. 175 expected ISO allowed to lefties since last year for Fetty. Only 126 to righties, so has done a much better job limiting right-handed power than left-handed power. Again, Pena, I think more so a price and position play. Same goes for Yainer Diaz. I'm like 2x the field on him, getting about 9% as a $3,400 catcher. The matchup is not ideal, but they do individually have power upside at good price tags and cheap positions. Angels taking on the Rangers in Texas. 4.6 implied run total for the Angels, 4.7 for the Rangers. Yusei Kikuchi is going for the Angels, as I've mentioned a couple of times. Tyler Mahle is going for the Rangers. Kikuchi getting 12% ownership at 7,800. I'm getting the 14%. Tyler Mahle is getting 9 to 10% ownership at 8K. I'm not really getting to him right now. Only have him in a couple of lineups. I think if you get to him some, it's okay. He's a decent enough pitcher, but we do have a low projection on him here. 15 and a half outs, 22 to 23 batters faced. Relatively low strikeout projection at 4.8. So you can see the projection here, why I'm not getting to much of him. I do think we are a little bit lower than the industry in general on him by like a point or two. So that's probably driving that a little bit. I don't think that anybody has him projected as a great play. They just have him projected slightly better than we do from in terms of better, meaning more fantasy points. But one way or the other, I'm not really getting too much of him. We've seen this Angels offense actually be productive to start the season. It's crazy what happens when Mike Trout is healthy. Taylor Ward, Luis Rengifo, Mike Trout, Jorge Soler, Travis d'Arnaud, Nolan Schanuel, Kyron Paris, so far at least. Like, this is actually a pretty formidable top and middle of the order here for the Angels. On the other side for Kikuchi, difficult matchup. Semien, Seager, Young, Garcia, strong 1 through 4. Kevin Pillar, tough to strike out, batting fifth. Jonah Heim is a solid hitting catcher. Bottom of the order leaves a bit to be desired, but Kikuchi is the second best strikeout pitcher on the slate going back to last year at 27.5%. 21% K percentage is tied, or K minus BB percentage rather, is tied with Schwellenbach for second best behind Flaherty. Price tag is reasonable at 7,800. So I think he's fine, even though the matchup is certainly scary. The park is good for home runs, but this is not a super deep Texas lineup. Langford is out as well, so that shortens it. Kikuchi, I think, looks pretty solid here at 7,800. He is just another, pretty good SP2. Certainly has the strikeout upside. Offensively here, you do have a park that is good for hitting home runs. I am getting to a lot of this game. The highest projected owned player is Travis d'Arnaud at 10%, followed by Semien, Rengifo, Seager, Young, Trout, Ward, Garcia, Soler. These guys all between 5 and 10% ownership. So again, on an 11-game slate, not a situation where you're getting a ton of raw ownership to any individual player, but you are just getting 5 to 10% ownership to most of the relevant good players in this game, and I am fine with that. I am getting more of the Texas side. Corey Seager showing up 17% of the time for me. Marcus Semien 15%. Higashioka batting 7th at 2,400, showing up 13%. Josh Young, Garcia, both above 10% for me as well. On the Angel side, I'm getting to 10% Soler, 9% on Ward, 8% on Pillar, 7% on d'Arnaud, 7% Trout, 7% Heim going back to the Rangers. So I am more over the field on Texas than the Angels, but I do think both sides look good. Both sides have a ton of power upside here. You do have some negative correlation against Kikuchi as well. 164 expected ISO to righties, 167 to lefties since the start of last year. But also keep in mind with Kikuchi, like, this is somebody that was a lot more boom or bust prior to last year. Last year, you just saw a lot more of the boom, him getting strikeouts, him pitching really, really well. Prior to that in his career, he was somebody that would get strikeouts, but also would give up home runs, put guys on base. So it's not out of the realm of possibility that, last year is kind of a one-year wonder, and he goes back to just being this guy that has plenty of blow-up starts mixed in there. And the top of this Texas order, at least, is pretty solid. And then Higashioka just gives you a cheap bat at catcher as well. And also, with Higashioka, you do have the same thing with him that I mentioned earlier with Gary Sanchez, where Jonah Heim is the DH in this game and Higashioka is catching. So you do lose a lot of the pinch hit risk that you would normally have, because in order to pinch hit for him, they're going to have to move Jonah Heim from the DH position, which means when that spot comes up in the order, their pitcher ends up hitting. So not really much pinch hit risk here for Higashioka, which is nice as well at 2,400. Cubs taking on the Padres in San Diego, second to last game on this slate. 4.5 implied run total for the Cubs, 3.8 for the Padres. Shota Imanaga going for the Cubs, Randy Vasquez going for the Padres. Field doesn't have much interest in either guy, and neither do I. 7% projected ownership coming in to Imanaga. None, period, coming into Randy Vasquez. I think the Vasquez side is correct. I'm actually lower on the Imanaga side as well. From a talent standpoint, at 8,700, you could certainly make a case for Imanaga. 23.9% strikeout percentage, 3.78 xFIP since last year. But this Padres team is very difficult to strike out. They just don't strike out a lot top to bottom. They're ranked 28th in strikeout percentage against left-handed pitching since the start of last year on their active roster at 19%. There's just plenty of other arms that I would rather get to. Offensively, I'm not getting to a ton of this game either, and neither is the field. Kyle Tucker getting the most ownership at 6%, along with Ian Happ. So left-handed bats here for the Cubs, getting a little bit of love against Randy Vasquez, which is perfectly fine. He's not a great pitcher. 214 expected ISO allowed to lefties since the start of... 214 expected ISO allowed to lefties since the start of last year. Only a 7.5% K percentage in that split, which is absurdly bad, obviously. 219 expected ISO allowed to lefties since the start of 2023 with an 8.8% strikeout percentage. Kyle Tucker, Ian Happ, I think they look very good. I'm not getting to too much of them. Neither is the field, probably because of salary and position. Same thing I was saying earlier with Riley Green and Kerry Carpenter. As good as, Kyle Tucker is, the opportunity cost in the outfield is just so high. It makes it tough to prioritize them as one-offs, because not only are the best hitters from most stacks going to be taking up at least one or two outfield spots, but then you also have, Kyle Tucker, Yordan Alvarez, Mike Trout, Aaron Judge, just as far as, some of the highest projected overall hitters on the slate. So it's tough to just say like, oh yeah, I'm just going to play Kyle Tucker 30% of the time or anything. But I do really like the spot for him. I like it for Ian Happ as well. The guy that I'm getting to the most in this game is Fernando Tatis at 7%. Field getting to 3%. The matchup here against Imanaga obviously is not good, but Fernando Tatis is running a lot this year. He has said that he's healthy, that's going to be a big part of his game again, and you just get so much power upside and stolen base upside for Tatis that where you do need a contrarian one-off, I do like getting to him quite a bit, even though the matchup against Imanaga is not particularly good. And then wrapping this one up with the Rockies taking on the Dodgers in LA. Good hitters park, obviously not Coors Field, but a good park for home runs. Ryan Feltner is going for the Rockies. Landon Knack is going for the Dodgers. Do not have the pitch count projection for Knack, but we do have him projected for just shy of 5 innings. In his most recent game or games, I could tell you if my screen wasn't frozen. Yeah, so I'll get back to that. But we do have him projected right now for 13.8 outs, 19 to 20 total batters faced. Still gives him a pretty solid projection at 7K. Field's getting to 16%. I'm not really getting to him. Again, maybe this is a spot where I end up a little bit higher once I rerun lineups closer to lock. But this is also another spot that would be driving up Ryan Pepio for me. So like if I start getting to more Knack, then I'm going to get less Pepio. But we had a big enough gap in projection between Pepio and Knack right now that it's just driving me to more Pepio. But I do think might be a little bit light on Knack. Probably not as confident in that as I am in Springs. But, for Knack, 69 pitches in his last game against Washington on the 9th, 2 1/3 innings pitched, gave up 5 earned runs. So usually when you see that, it's not necessarily that he was taken out because of a pitch count. It was that he was pitching like shit also. So that's something to keep in mind. I think it's probably likely that you're getting like 80 to 85 pitches tonight would be my guess. And I do think that's more or less in line with the way we have him projected. Whereas Springs, I think, clearly took that big step forward last start through 103 pitches. So the matchup here for Knack is obviously good against the Rockies. I think he's fine. He's just somebody I'm not really getting right now. Feltner, brutal matchup. I think he's a decent real life pitcher, and you are getting him outside of Colorado, which is good. But 7,200 taking on the Dodgers, not going to really be messing with that one. Offensively here, Shohei Ohtani, I think the highest owned hitter on the slate, 20% projected ownership. I'm getting to 31%. He's my highest owned hitter on the slate as well, I believe. Mookie Betts, 12% ownership, next highest owned guy for the field. I'm at 7%. So I'm getting to some bats in this game, but it's a lot of guys in the like 5 to 10% range. And that's the same for the field as well. But the clear standout is Ohtani, 20% ownership, like I said, 31% of my lineups. First base outfield eligibility, so you don't have to play him in the outfield. Obviously, first base has plenty of opportunity cost as well, but it does just give you that extra lineup spot that you can use. $6,500 price tag is fine. Plenty of stolen base upside in addition to his power upside. Feltner, from a splits standpoint, going back to the start of last season, only a 157 expected ISO to lefties, 154 to righties. I actually want to pull up his Fangraphs page because if I remember correctly, he is bad at holding runners. He's either good or he's bad, which obviously sounds dumb, but I mean that in the sense that, like, I don't think he's neutral. Maybe he is, but going from memory, I don't think he's neutral. Last season, yeah, okay. He allowed 29 stolen bases last season. He's allowed 3 already this season in 16 innings. So that is something else that is probably driving Ohtani a bit here. If we look at our projections. And again, this is something great if you do use our projections. One, you can see exactly what's going into them, so you can decide if there's something you don't agree with. For example, going back to the Jeffrey Springs point, it's entirely possible that I'm going to mention it and I'm going to be told that I'm wrong, and that we're comfortable with the projection, which is perfectly fine. But like if you're using it, you can look and say, look, I disagree with this, and so I'm going to bump him. Whereas with a lot of projection sources, you're given the projection, but not the underlying stats. And so it's a lot more dangerous in that case to decide that you disagree with something because you don't actually know what you're disagreeing with. Here, you can say, I disagree with Jeffrey Springs outs or, whatever. So that's something that's really good. And then also you can obviously use these to bet props as well. And that's something that we are in the process of working on adding to our subscription. Also is using all of these stats to drive our prop betting tool. That'll be coming sooner than later. But getting back to the point I was making, 0.24 stolen base projection for Shohei Ohtani here, I would guess is one of the highest, second highest on the slate behind Pete Crow Armstrong. So that looks really good. And you kind of just have everything working in his favor. He's most likely leading off, so he has the opportunity to get on base with nobody ahead of him. You have a pitcher in Feltner that cannot hold runners. Everything looks very, very good for Ohtani. Great play, like goes without saying, but chalk for a reason. Absolutely love getting to him. Highest projected hitter on the slate, and I think that he should be. But really wanted to point out that stolen base component in this matchup against Feltner. We also have, pretty good stolen base projections here on Betts, decent on Freeman, Teoscar, Edman. The Dodgers, as a stack or as one-offs or as mini stacks, whatever, there's a stolen base upside throughout this lineup in addition to them just being good hitters. So, when you're going up against Feltner, it's not so much that you love the matchup from a hitting standpoint, it's that the Dodgers hitters themselves are really good. You do love the stolen base matchup, and you do love the park for home runs. So upside here is really high. Ohtani, the clear priority. I do have some interest in getting to the Rockies bats as well. They're just not getting ownership. They're cheap. Goodman, Tovar, Farmer if he's in the lineup. Brenton Doyle's just really good and only 4,100 if he's in the lineup. McMahon hits the ball hard. He's only 3,100. So if I look at like how some of my Rockies stacks look, if I pull up my 5-mans over here, I can just kind of go through them. You look at the pitching, and I'm getting to like McGill Brown with a 3-man Yankee stack with, Judge, Bellinger, Goldschmidt, Rockies, Yankees again, Rockies with Freeman, Ohtani, Fried, McGill. Like, you can definitely stack the Rockies in a way where you're putting yourself in the position of, yeah, they're probably not going to do good because they are a minor league baseball team and they absolutely fucking suck. But if by some miracle they actually score like 6, 7, 8 runs, the rest of your lineup is just studs and loaded at pitcher, loaded at one-offs or secondary stacks, whatever it may be. So that does give you in these large field tournaments, a pretty interesting stack. Not that I think they're going to do well, but the low percentage of the time they do well, it's likely to actually pay pretty nicely for you. So clearly would rather be getting to the Dodger side, but did just want to point that out with the Rockies here, even though they suck. Knack also getting some ownership, so you have that as well. So somebody asked for a home run pick earlier. I will take Kyle Tucker. I really just like him in the spot against Vasquez. Gives up power, doesn't miss bats. Kyle Tucker, home run pick here. And then just to recap the way things look for me right now, my highest owned pitchers on the slate are Pepio, Fried, Flaherty, followed by Ober, Morton, McGill, Kikuchi. I do think Pepio probably comes down a little bit, and I think that I get a pretty good amount of Jeffrey Springs once I adjust for that projection. But I do think that the pitching exposure looks pretty good to me. From an overall individual hitter standpoint, Shohei Ohtani, Michael Harris, Aaron Judge, Austin Riley, Ben Rice, my 5 highest owned hitters. My 5 highest owned 5-man stacks on DraftKings: Orioles, Astros, Rangers, Tigers, and then just a bunch of teams lumped together: Rockies, Red Sox, Guardians. Highest owned stacks overall on DraftKings: Yankees, Braves, Rangers, Orioles, and Astros, followed by the Dodgers right behind the Astros. So I am using the Dodgers mini stacks a lot. Shohei Ohtani obviously driving that. So that's all I have for you on this one. Glad to be back doing this show. We'll continue to do that throughout the week. Don't forget to sign up. Use our projections at runthesims.com, driven by Utical, Nerdy Tanner, Brick75, myself. Definitely excited to use these this year. You can get those using the link in the description below. Other than that, hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. All that stuff helps out quite a bit. And I will be back here again tomorrow. Good luck on your lineups tonight.